Hi everybody, it's Courtney. I'm here with another design team project for Not Too Shabby. Today I'm going to be creating a mini scene with the You're So Tweet stamp set by Not Too Shabby. And I'm going to take a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and this is cut down to 5.5 by 4.25. And I'm going to use my grid mat just to make sure I'm lining this up correctly. But I'm taking 2 pieces of Post-it note tape, and I'm lining that up on the top and bottom of the card panel there. And this is going to be a landscape card. This is just to kind of mask off, obviously, the top and bottom, but our scene is going to be basically just a strip that's going across the center of the card panel. I struggled with this top one a little bit because I wasn't using the lines on my grid mat. I was kind of trying to eyeball it, so I did have to move this around quite a few times before I felt like it was even and I had enough space to create my little mini scene. So once that was done, we're going to go ahead and move on to the stamping. And I'm using this branch that is part of the stamp set, but I'm not using it as a branch. I'm going to use this as a tree. So I'm going to be stamping with Blackout ink by Ink on 3, which is a Copic safe ink. I'm going to stamp this branch as a tree twice on either side. And you can see that it's much larger than the area that we're working with here, but that's fine. And then I'm going to mask out that one that's off to the left and stamp it once again. I'm using Simon Says stamp masking paper, but you can really use anything for this, especially when you're masking the card panel itself, and you'll see why as we move forward. So going to stamp this branch or tree the second time, and then go ahead and stamp this little birdhouse as well as one of the little birds. There's a couple of owls in the stamp set as well as the bird that I'm using in the card today. I want my birdhouse to not just be hanging in midair there. So I'm taking my T-square ruler and an EK Success journaling pen, which is a Copic safe pen, just to draw in, I guess it would be the post of the little tree house. And again, just eyeballing this. You can certainly use the T-square ruler for the purpose it's intended, but this is just eyeballing it. So once all of that was done, we're going to move on to the Copic coloring, and I'm going to start off with the trees. I recommend you don't do this. I recommend you start off with the background, but I didn't take my own advice. So I'm going to start off with the lightest color to map out the darkest areas, and I'm going to kind of use a light source being in the top right hand corner, which will mean my shadows, and my shadows will be to the bottom left, my highlights will be to the top right. Going to get my paper saturated so that my colors blend a little bit easier. My darkest color here is the E18, again just concentrating to the bottom left hand side for this, blending that out a little bit further with the E15, then the E13, and then finally I'll move back to that E11 just for that highlight area that will be mainly off to the right hand side. Next, we're going to move on to the leaves of the trees here, and obviously going to use a green combination. Going to start off with my lightest color to map out the darkest areas and to get the paper saturated, and this is actually a YG marker, the YG03, which will ultimately be my lightest color, my highlight color. So I'm just concentrating my darkest areas for the leaves being on the base of each of the leaves, and where one leaf is underneath another or laying behind another, that would also cast a shadow. Going in with that darkest color, then the 2 midtones, and just flicking those colors out just a little bit further, leaving the very tips of the leaves for that highlight color, that YG03. When I go in with that highlight color, I am covering up the entire leaf because we're moving from a G marker to a YG marker. So just to kind of brighten everything up, I cover the entire leaf. So all of those were colored the exact same. Moving on to this little bird, again, starting off with my lightest color to get the paper saturated a little bit. I want my bird to be yellow, but I am placing my shadows with a pretty dark orange here. And I'm using it very sparingly in only the very darkest areas. Now, even though my light source is in the top right, I either forgot that my light source was in the top right, or because this bird is kind of facing off to the left hand side, I put more of the shading to the right hand side, if that makes any sense. But I'm just leaving a very small highlight for that Y04 because it is such a really, really bright yellow. It's like a fluorescent yellow. It's pretty bright. So I use that very sparingly. Next, we're going to move on to the little birdhouse here. And for the post, I'm just using two different grays, a C5 on either side. And then for the center, it would be a C3 as if it was a round object. For the little roof, I guess it would be, of the birdhouse as well as the base there, going to switch over to some R80 markers. Again, starting off with that lightest color. For the roof, I'm placing the darkest areas being on the bottom portion of the roof because the top would be facing the light. For the base of it, I am concentrating my darkest area being off to the left-hand side, blending that out each time with the R85, R83, and then finishing off with that lightest color again, just for that highlight area. For the house itself, going to switch over to some V markers, and again, going to concentrate my light source being in the top right, but I'm also creating a shadow underneath where the roof would kind of hang over the rest of the house. Now, I initially have 4 colors here, but once I almost got done with the coloring, I realized that the highlight wasn't quite strong enough with the V12. So once I get to that V12, I'm leaving myself just a little bit of room on the right-hand side, and I'm going to bring in the V000, which is a very, very light purple, but it will allow it to have a lot more contrast. The V12 just wasn't quite light enough. For the little opening, I guess that little heart opening of the birdhouse, going to bring back out those C markers, and I'm just going to, you can color this solid black, but I'm using the C7, C5, and C3, again, just to have a little bit of contrast there. So next, now that everything is colored, we are going to do our background, which again, do this first. You can see that I have some smearing on my masking paper or the Post-it note tape, and that's fine. I'm just kind of being careful because I know I rested my hand in it, that I don't want to kind of move that ink around too much. So I'm being very careful to go around these images because the blue color, pardon me, the B00 is such a light color, it's going to act as if it's a colorless blender with just a little bit of pigment in it. So if I touch the tip of that marker to any of the darker areas, such as the greens or the browns, I'm going to spread that color to places I don't need it to be or don't want it to be. So you just need to be super careful when you're using a light color and creating such a large background like this. So once all the background was completely done, we're going to add some grass. And I'm going to start off with the G09. Well, first I forgot the beak and the little feet of the bird. So we're going to start off with the G09, and I'm just basically just doing flicking motions randomly between the trees, between the little birdhouse. I'm not going very far up initially because I just kind of want to map out this area. I am going to add a little bit of contrast here by bringing in a G28, which is a very, very dark green. And I'm basically going over the same areas that I went over with that G09. Once I was happy with that, I'm going to bring back out the G09, and I'm going to extend my blades of grass a little bit longer. I still want that G28 to show through, so I'm not adding as many as the shorter ones, but I do want to have a little bit of contrast here and a little bit of differentiation between the lengths, I guess. So once the coloring was done, I'm going to carefully remove the Post-it note tape, and you can see that I did have a little bit of bleeding through here, so it's not a complete straight line that I have. In order to make this look as if it's a straight line, you could use a gel pen, a white gel pen, to fix this area up, but I didn't want that gel pen to show. So I'm going to bring back out another EK Success Journaling pen and my T-square ruler, and I'm basically just creating an outline, or an outline around my little scene on both the top and the bottom. I'm using pretty large nib here because there are so many areas that aren't completely even, and this will make it appear as if it is. Now, because I'm extending my little scene a little bit further, there were some areas that I need to go back and fix up, like some of the tips of the leaves on the trees. My coloring didn't match where I placed that black line. So I did have to go in to some of these areas and just fix these areas up a little bit and make sure that the coloring extended to where it needed to be. So next I'm going to go ahead and stamp out my sentiment, also from the same stamp set, with some black ink in the lower right hand corner right below my little scene there. And I wanted to add some shimmer with a Nouveau Aqua Shimmer pen, and you can see that when I took the cap off, it kind of splattered right onto my little scene. So I wasn't sure how I was going to fix this. So I'm not sure if you guys can see it on camera, but I decided to create some sparkly clouds. It's hard to see unless you kind of move the card around, but that was the only way that I could really cover up that big dot that was just there. And last, I'm going to add some white gel pen details to most of the leaves, as well as the little birdhouse and the bird itself. This will just give a little bit more of a highlight and a reflection to add a little bit of added interest to the coloring itself. But that is it. That is the card for today, guys. I will leave all of the supplies listed in the description box below, as well as the discount code for the Not Too Shabby shop. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and have a great day. Bye.